So, most importantly, welcome to the show, Tom. Much appreciated for joining today.
Thank you.
We tend to do videos here and there, and this is one of our first ones about products. So, most importantly, I would just like to welcome you to the show, but also, most importantly, introduce Tom. So, we've got Tom Retty here, which is product management, strategic thinker, commercial delivery expert, I think is the right way to put it. Tom, can you just give a little bit of information about yourself, if you don't mind?
Yeah, so I've been in product for what feels like it's probably around about 20 years now, but I kind of started out on a slightly different path to a lot of other people, whereas my background comes from kind of like marketing and acquisition side of things. And I've kind of transitioned through a few industries over time as well, starting off in financial sort of services, so kind of like trading businesses, and then through to kind of emerging technologies and telco businesses, and then through to more kind of like data-driven and SaaS-based businesses over the last few years.
Oh, fantastic. And give us a bit of information about, because a lot of people that we work with are from high growth startup companies all the way through to sort of blue chip companies as well. We ourselves, as you probably know, we specialize in iGaming, but also across the high growth tech startups, which are kind of going into sort of blockchain as well. But I know you've got kind of experience going across from iGaming to different verticals. And something that kind of interested me, and I hope everyone else that's probably watching this, is how does it change, products across, different verticals like that? I mean, have you noticed a massive change from going from, I don't know, Virgin that you work for to an iGaming sector business company that you work for?
I'm going to kind of talk about it slightly backwards, because I think this is, one of the challenges that I see out there is people being able to move through different industries as well. And I think that's wrong, is my kind of initial sort of thought on that. And the reason for that being is actually, if you just move people around the different organizations within the same industry, you end up doing the same things basically, but just with different logos on the front door. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, but actually what you don't get is the variety of thinking and ways of doing things that kind of challenges the kind of day-to-day for, within an industry. So, I think there's a lot of what we do in product management that is, highly transferable. The kind of, I'll sort of talk a bit about it later, but, I suppose your approach and the framework in which you do product management, that is a discipline in itself and should be able to be applied across kind of different industries.
Yeah, of course.
To your point around kind of like the different types of products, yeah, there are different challenges, right? If I look at somebody like, back at sort of my days in Vodafone Global, where we were trying to deliver a kind of like, in theory, a one size fits all, solution to the customers, but actually one of the challenges you have is that all of the businesses look different underneath the surface. So actually from a technology stack perspective, you're kind of looking at the same challenges, but with different providers, and that gives you different nuances on how you deliver things. So the kind of like ideal cookie cutter is not that easy to grasp. And then actually if you transition into some of like gaming and those kind of areas as well, and data-driven businesses, they have very similar technology stacks, in terms of the way in which they're trying to pull their products together, ultimately to the end for their customers and users. So to me, there's a lot of similarities. The biggest learning curve is being able to understand that kind of, the domain of the business and the sector of it, and really be able to be, as a product person, passionate and lead on that. And I think that's, always a challenge. But one of my, views on that is, if you make sure you immerse yourself in the business and surround yourself by those people who have the knowledge, you should be working collaboratively as a team, and therefore, together you unstoppable is kind of what wants to spring to mind. But whether
that's interesting, but that's kind of what's worked, I think, for you, isn't it? It's the fact you've worked, I mean, having that sort of, I guess, experience across the different sort of verticals, because a product's a product. Okay, digital products can vary, but we used to build apps many years ago. So we used to see many different applications coming through. You had a back end you had to run, obviously, with a front end mobile app. But for us at the time, even building this tech, it was all about the overall picture, or the objective of the actual project was front end, back end. Okay, what's the actual scope of the product? Go and deliver. But I think also we're very two-dimensional thinking like that. I think what's great about you is you've got this kind of mix where you're saying, well, I've learned stuff from particularly Vodafone, that is transferable to any sort of company within reason.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's knowing the domain, right? It's knowing what is the business about,
Yeah.
where is it going from day one to day wherever, A to Z roadmap. What are the users? And this is what we speak to product directors all the time and product managers. Product teams are changing, right? They're changing all the time. Or is it the fact technology is changing, but it's just the products themselves are changing? I mean, what do you see that's changed in the environment, over the years? Or is it the fact it's still the same?
It's about that kind of evolution as well, which, kind of use that, corny phrase, evolution versus revolution. Like, I think kind of one leads to the other as well. But,
yeah.
But yeah, things are changing. You get new technologies, if you think 10, 15 years ago, in my career, there wasn't such thing as like cloud-based, SaaS-based, products and services. And that brings a whole new dynamic to it. But it also, as a product person, it's not just around the shiny thing that you hand over to your users, whether that's business or consumer. It's also around all the other peripherals that sit around it, right? So that brings new challenges around security, around, compliance, GDPR, right? Big thing at the moment. And, so I'll talk a bit later sort of around kind of what a product person is, but for me, it's around being at the center of those things and kind of having considered and a pragmatic approach to understanding what all the different drivers and levers are that drive your product. So I kind of hesitate at the beginning because, like, to me, it doesn't feel like it's changed that much, but actually I suppose if I looked at what I was dealing with 15 plus years ago, it's very different. And this is where to kind of turn that into a product thing, and not everything is driven by product, but we should be kind of at the heart of a lot of it is being data driven around the decisions that you're making in the business. So actually it shouldn't also happen not just because you've got scalable cloud, but because what's going to happen with the demand for your product.
I love that.
You should be able to have a good view. I mean, there's always stuff that happens, the unexpected happens, and that's good, it keeps us on our toes. But if you analyze and look at the information you've got to hand, then you should, most stuff should be kind of predictable, at least within some tolerance.
Yeah, I agree. So the killer question is, what makes a good product director?
For me, kind of fundamentally, one of the things is, I've always been in technology. And so from a kind of selfish point of view, what I've enjoyed is I like technology and I like the evolution of it. And, through to, even personally, I have lots of gadgets and stuff like that. That's what excites me. So,
I saw your number one Alexa before we started the video.
yeah, don't say it too loudly. She'll chime in. So sometimes technology gets a little in the way. But for me, it's about something you believe in, and that's kind of twofold. So whether it's the product itself or the technology that underlies it, ideally kind of both of them. A good product, and I don't think this just applies to product director level. I think it's the same trait all the way through. Yeah. And to me, transparency is, one of the things that, I've always been told I'm very good at when I've sort of spoken to people who I've worked with. And, it's about making people feel involved as part of the process you're going through in product development, listened to and, involved in that. And then, I suppose that kind of comes down to, communicate. And I sort of put, in my mind, it's about listening, it's about reasoning. And, that drives for me off my view of a product person is you're the custodian of the product, right? I kind of hate the term product owner because everybody owns the product. It's just that the product people within your organization are there to help make sure you gather all of the influencing opinions, facts, and kind of distill that down to make salient business decisions. I think it's really important.
What I'm finding as well from the recruitment perspective, obviously in the last probably 5 years, maybe less than that, probably 2.5 actually, but it's become more evident within marketing teams, obviously, product teams. Everything is so data driven now. You've got access to that plethora of data, which can make really, really critical informed decisions on the business. So just going back a bit on data. So was that always a part of the sort of everyday cycle across where you've worked across the sort of different industries? Or have you noticed more so in the last few years, it's become more evident where everyone's like, within the product teams up to the sort of C-level drivers of the business, you can then answer their questions very coherently to say, look, this is what's happening with the user journey. we need to adapt and we need to move and we need to do this because of what the data is telling us to do?
Yeah, I think data is always an influence. I don't think it's, the be all and end all, but I think because of the industries I've been in, I've been fortunate that there is an abundance of data. In the early days of mobile and telco, they were the sort of, I suppose, the latter day versions of what you're looking at, people like Facebook and Google. And I'm not likening their business before anyone kind of like berates me in comments about this, but just in terms of how they behave, because they owned the customer. They don't now, they probably think they do, but the likes of Google and Facebook, etc., and Amazon, they really own the customer relationship. This is a dumb device, really. But back in the day, they did, and so therefore we had a lot of customer data, and that could, you could understand customer behavior because it was, again, very limited of what they could do. So you could see, you had all of their behavior coming through one device, whereas now we're, really heavily reliant on Wi-Fi and, other, and you're channeled through other applications rather than, you make calls through WhatsApp and stuff like that. So it's really dissipated in terms of the data that they have to reach on.
Data points, across the omni-channel spectrums are just vast now. If you go back 10 years ago, you would have said, right, TV, radio, internet, which is very limited to computer. Then comes out obviously smart TVs, and then obviously tablets and mobile phones as well. So I think the user experience is massive now across product, right? It's got to be the area I guess people are focused on, because there's so many entries, points of entry to market for the consumer, and understanding that user, whether he's coming on a mobile or a desktop or whatever, is so vital today for the product you're building, right?
Although you think you really, really, really understand the customer and what they're doing, I've had specific examples where we were doing something that was was very new. I mean, these days doesn't sort of touch the sides in terms of the capabilities we've got with our phones, but we were doing it it was actually within Orange, which is now EE. And we had a case all built around voice-driven revenue, basically, and all of the data pointed towards that. And what we did do is we put it out to test to a very small proportion of people, and the business case got smashed. I.e., the revenue was great, but it was all through data, and it was like totally unforeseen. And actually, sometimes you just don't know how people will interact with features or functionality that you bring out. So
I love that analogy. So we keep hearing a lot with customers about OKRs.
yeah,
I'm assuming you're familiar with OKRs, and if so, why?
It's really important because it brings people along with you. It gives them real clarity. Back to my point earlier around transparency and communicating. They understand why they're building something. If they're in engineering teams or product guys owning it, it gives them, it aligns with the company vision. Your roadmap should then also hang off those OKRs. So for those who don't know, they're objectives and key results. So your objective could be as large as Amazon's might be. I want to be the biggest user of cardboard boxes in the world. I mean, that would be a terrible objective.
Sorry, can I just say, are they? Because I understand what they are, but are they KPIs but enhanced?
No, I think KPIs are more operational in my view. So KPI would be, we want to see this amount of uptime of our servers, or you might want number of users per day. To me, they're kind of more service or operational driven, whereas OKRs should be, they're more goal oriented, and so therefore slightly aspirational. And I also believe that OKRs, you should set them slightly beyond your reach so you can set to overachieve as well. Document you kind of walk around with as a product person is a roadmap, and actually I think you could, if you can sit there and say, well, everything on this roadmap is really well aligned to our company mission, and this is why, because we've got these 3 objectives or however many, and look, each of these delivers a key result for each of those. I think it, to me, gives real alignment. But one of the fundamentals for me is around teams and that sense of belonging and feeling like we are all heading and contributing to the same goal, and not heading in different directions potentially.
That links into quite nicely to my next question, though, which is, what challenges do you think a business have in adopting product first rather than tech first approach?
My experience is a lot of businesses who sort of start off quite early on and do very well tend to kind of get quieted in being a kind of tech first led business. And this doesn't mean it's necessarily one is right or wrong. Like for different types of businesses, one answer is tech first might be right. Also people talk about being sales driven and marketing driven as well, but I kind of feel that should be fed into the product anyway. So
yeah, of course,
steal that as a product first. To me, ultimately, it's about putting the customer at the heart of what you're doing, right? Driving the user experience to drive adoption. I have inherited portfolios of products where I have seen them being heavily driven by technology. They had this raft of features they wanted to roll out. And I just looked at it and the customer would have literally taken one look and run the other way and gone, this is too complicated. I'm going to stick with what I'm doing today because it works, right? And sometimes people don't know that they need something until they have it, right? Mobile phones are a great example. A lot of people a lot younger than me will probably have always had mobile phones, but millions of years ago when I was younger, you didn't have a mobile phone. There were pay phones on every street. You had a phone at work and you had a phone at home. Why do I need a mobile phone? And now look at us. It's everyone has it within.
One important thing about the phone box, and that was, do you remember phone cards?
Yeah.
The green.
That was
phone
an evolution.
cards.
Yeah.
That was revolutionary at the time, wasn't it?
And there was your first sort of like portable branding because people used to pay to brand them as well.
Oh,
so
really?
That's how we've come along. Yeah,
that's right. Sponsorship. I do remember them actually. Yes.
Yeah.
Wow, that's bringing back a blast from the past, isn't it?
So showing my age probably too much, but kind of like so my point being that I suppose that was a slight tangent, is that innovation, they don't all users don't always know they need it, but to be a product first business is around having that kind of like key user experience. And so my point of where that particular instance, I think it was about 50 odd features that they were trying to release. We did release that product. It was a huge success, but we released with 2 features. Some of the product first
really
stuff.
Critical. You just hit the nail on the head there. It's, and I apply this to. I've got a couple of businesses that I run, as you know, and that is, what's the problem you're trying to solve, right? And I think it's really easy to go off on a tangent with a huge investment behind you if you're a high growth startup and they haven't got that clear focus. Yes, they know what the business is doing. They've got a goal, but actually, what's the product about? What is it? What are they trying to achieve? What are they trying to solve within that issue? Can you recommend, because there's going to be a lot of product people that we connect with on LinkedIn and YouTube as well. Can you recommend any good product books that product people, whether it be product owners, product managers, senior SPMs, senior product managers, also product directors, much like yourself? Is there anything that kind of changed your life after picking up that book, or can aid them in their life?
Changed my life. Okay, so I will start with one that changed my life. So I got made redundant in my second job. I had a great relationship with lots of people there. It was actually one of the best things that ever happened to me in my career. So thank you. And because it found me the job that I really loved and wanted, and I realized that I didn't love that job. So there was a guy there who was like a really senior sales director. I mean, I was pretty junior, and he had just like really liked the way I worked, and we got on really well. And he came up to me at my leaving drinks and presented me with a book, and he said, "I think this is a really good way of looking at life." And he said, and he told me this whole story about how he'd been given one as well. And it's, I can't remember whose Bible. It's called "Who Moved My Cheese." And it's kind of one of these like minute manager books. And I've still got it somewhere on a shelf in here, but it's it's just I don't think it's groundbreaking. So for me, a lot of it was around kind of like, I suppose, the circumstances when I got it, but it just makes you kind of like reflect a little bit around decisions and why you're doing things and how other people behave. So that's quite interesting. There's other stuff like Our Iceberg is Melting and all those kind of classic books, and I think there's lots like that. One for me is, I'm looking down, sorry, because I've written his name down just so I pronounce, but there's a guy who actually taught me product management when I was within one of my early businesses called Stephen Haynes. And I just really like his approach, and a lot of it still sticks with me today. And he's got a whole bunch of books out there. Yeah, I mean, he's evolved it as things have changed. You know, agile product development didn't even exist then, and it does now. And you know, he sort of takes a view on that. He's also got a bunch of podcasts as well, which are sort of definitely worth listening to. But yeah, I just really like his, and he's got a huge amount of experience across different industries. So you know, it's not
Awesome.
like people kind of like go, well, you know, that only applies here. You know, he's got a view. So yeah, that to me is a really good book. And interestingly, I've been into businesses where I've seen sort of like new product managers with that book, you know,
Oh, really?
desk
That's good
reference
to
on
hear.
their desk. Yeah. So
It's like we're thinking on the same wavelength here, aren't we?
yeah,
You
yeah.
know that book. I know that book. Um, Killer question. If you were to give any advice to future product teams of today, what would it be?
I think I'd go back to what you asked me earlier around kind of like what are the traits of a good product person, and I think it's, you know, that communicate, be transparent, be pragmatic, take ownership. You know, like you be passionate about what you're doing. And I know these all sound like, you know, really sort of generalistic things, but you know, I was talking to some ex-colleagues recently, and I remember one of them said to me that when he first met me, he walked into a room and I was dealing with a whole load of, you know, sort of C-level execs within Vodafone, and he said, I was always really impressed with how you were kind of like holding your you know ground, or sort of like holding the court in the room. And that's because I'd listened to people, you know, I'd taken on board what they were saying, but equally they weren't all right. And so it was around kind of being transparent and sort of laying on the table. So it's kind of, yeah, I'm not answering directly with, there's no like kind of golden nugget, but it's right, you know, use that data, be really confident in how you're presenting it, be ready to be challenged.
And
You
accountable,
know,
like you said. I think that's really critical with any part of the
yeah,
business, even, you know, more so within product, right?
and remember the customer. You know, like who is it, and use a
Yes.
kind of like, I always talk about why. You know, speak to yourself and say, right, we're going to be doing this, and imagine someone says, but why?
Yeah.
And if you can't answer the question, then think, well, hold on, maybe I need a bit, you know, bit more information around this. So, you know, ask why a lot of yourself and why you're doing it. You know,
Yeah.
it's be confident in it, but ask why. And have a solid roadmap. You know, I think don't be afraid to plan. Yeah, I find this in a lot of agile environments where people confuse agile with chaotic. You know, you still have a plan in an agile environment. It just means that you have the ability to pivot and do things, you know, a bit faster than probably in the kind of like old waterfall kind of approach. So, you know, I have a roadmap view where I split it into 3 sections. I have it as decided. So this is the stuff you are working on and you are going to deliver. Intended, pretty sure this is what's going to come in if you're doing quarterly or however your sprints work planning. That's what's going to come in next. And then the next bit is around aspire, and that could stretch out 12, 18, 2 years, you know, but just put all your wish list down, and that will, it's like a funnel, will filter down as you go through it.
Amazing.
So plan and talk to people about it and be that custodian, I think is would be my key advice.
Fantastic. I like that. And it's really critical when you look at, you know, product teams and when you said something really interesting, actually, waterfall. We used to develop in waterfall all the time, and I haven't heard that for years and years because it all went over to agile and everyone wanted to
Yeah,
get bits done. But we were like, in the old days, I mean, this is in the late 90s, we were building tech and just getting everything out there, as many features as possible, and then going, the customer didn't want that. And then it's like, let's take that away, let's take that away. We just spent all that time. Agile was born, you know, it was just a really good thing for product teams. So your feedback there was immense. And I hope people that are watching this, you know, from product teams, you know, you know, can pick up and take away some really good feedback out of this. And, you know, anyone that's got any questions or anything, please do comment below. Hopefully Tom will reply, if not me. If it's too product specific, hopefully Tom can give us some update. But for anything else, obviously, I'm more than happy to answer. But Tom, thanks ever so much for your time.
thank you.
Really, really appreciate it. It was just invaluable, the stuff you've just kind of put out there. It's fantastic. And hopefully, like I said, people that listen to this can get some good key takeaways. So thanks you so much.